Well, good evening and welcome everybody to this IJA, the Indian Journalists Association event. As you know, IJA has a lot of historical relevance. It was established in 1947, the year of India's independence and the birth of Pakistan. So today we're starting something new, at least trying to, called the IJA Conversation. And we'll begin this with the special discussion on one of South Asia's most enduring and complex fault lines, the relationship between India and Pakistan. In light of the recent face-off between the two countries, we are here not to sensationalize or speculate, but to understand, to explore the military realities, the diplomatic postures, and crucially, the historical weight that continues to shape every move and misstep. These moments of tension are never isolated. They're shaped by decades of conflict and occasional cooperation. They also unfold in a region that is home to a quarter of the world's population, two nuclear-armed states, and a vast diaspora watching closely. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by two distinguished voices who bring to the table deep expertise and the much-needed nuance. Let me introduce both of them. To my left is Shruti Kapila, who's a professor of history and politics and a fellow of Corpus Christi College at the University of Cambridge, where she focuses on modern India and global politics. Kapila recently spent several months in India serving as the inaugural visiting professor at the National Law School of India, Bangalore. Widely published, her research ranges on the history of race, empire, and science to the study of global political ideas, violence, gender, and democracy. Her latest book is Violent Fraternity, Indian Political Thought in the Global Age. She's commissioned to publish and is currently working on a book on the history and politics of contemporary India in the global context. She was awarded an OBE in the King's Birthday Honours List in June 2024 for her services to research and humanities. On my right is Dr. Ayesha Siddiqa. She's currently a senior fellow at the Department of War Studies, King's College London, from where she also did her PhD. Earlier, she was a fellow at the South Asia Institute at SOAS. She's author of 2 books on Pakistan, including the highly acclaimed Military Inc. Inside Pakistan's Military Economy. She was a Charles Wallace Fellow at St. Antony's College, Oxford, the inaugural Pakistan Fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, and a Ford Fellow at the Bonn International Center for Conversion. Dr. Siddiqa has taught at the University of Pennsylvania and Johns Hopkins University. So without much ado, I think we'll start the discussion. The first question will be to both of them, whoever chooses to go first.
No, you choose, you're the chair.
Okay. What do you think is different about this round of conflict? And has Pakistan been let off the hook? Shruti, you go first.
Can I start? Is it on? Yeah. Okay, so I do think this is qualitatively different for both sort of the immediate context that preceded it, as well as what actually happened in the conflict, and how it is now being, as it were, redefining world affairs. So the first is the overall context, which is to say that in 2025, you have a fragmenting but still unipolar world, according to me, which is America. And in my view, and I think this would be, like, I'll put my cards on the table straight away rather than, clear my throat and so on. And China, which is assumed to be more powerful, but in my view is less powerful than it is so. I think I'm with the former National Security Advisor's latest book, The World Adrift, by Shiv Shankar Menon, where he actually says that it's more or less a regional power. China is not quite a world power. And I think that's an interesting way to think about it, because China has been very much in the mix in this conflict. I don't think we can run away from it. And I think I'll come to the Indian side in a second, but I just wanted to paint this context. And secondly, I think during the conflict, this assertion has been borne out, because ultimately the fact that the ceasefire, such as it was, came from the Americans, which has been controversial for various different other reasons. But that would embarrass, in my view, and I'd be curious to see what Dr. Siddiqa says, that would embarrass certainly the Chinese-Pakistan close relationship, which has been there from the get-go. So I think there is the fact that, as it were, the Americans had to securitize Pakistan is a sign of the fact that the Pakistan-American relationship is still one of need, rather than one in which the Chinese can be more powerful. So to me, it has been it has shown the limits of Chinese power first and foremost. Having said that, I think historically this is very different for the same reason that India has never had a rising power or a supremacist power in its neighborhood ever in its millennial long histories. So the fact that China is a neighbor, but also is an expansionist power, puts India in a very different geopolitical situation, which it has not witnessed. Thirdly, Indian foreign policy has moved very significantly, and I have written this in my New Statesman piece, both for the G20, but also for this, which is to say that the long-held doctrine of strategic autonomy has now competed with a new doctrine, which is to say of multilateralism. And this has meant that India has not really, the upshot of it, which is that the neighborhood first policy, India's attention in the last decade has not been on its neighborhood. It has been more interested in thinking about the global reordering, given the world is adrift. It doesn't have any of the bipolarity that we may think about. As a result, this has meant that India has been interested in, trade talks with Britain, trade talks with America, Quad, various other groupings, and has not really focused and had effectively so-called dehyphenated itself for the first time from Pakistan. Now, all of that has, I wouldn't say come undone, but it looks, it now feels that the neighborhood has asserted its presence, let's put it like that. The neighborhood has demanded its attention, and India is in a challenging position because whatever we may call broadly the West, which otherwise finds India a very useful ally to counterbalance China, has not done enough for Indian expectations on the question of terror. And I think all these are now in the mix, and these will be hard negotiations. And we can talk about the conflict in a bit, what we think about what happened, and so on. But I think this is the big picture. I don't think we can abstract China out of it. If we're going to talk about America, we have to talk about China. But I would think that the Chinese situation is, to me, has been tested as one of limits, not of expansion.
Dr. Siddiqa.
Thank you so much. Thank you for organizing this, and it's great to have a sensible conversation. What are my takeaways from this conflict? We've had conflicts before. See, firstly, I think very importantly, the performative factor has been very prominent on both sides. earlier on, I mean, Pakistan and India on Kashmir alone have fought 3 wars, 47, 48, 65, and Kargil. But geostrategy had a pace and walked on its pace very differently. In the limited wars that we have begun to fight since 2016, the performative factor has become more prominent. So it's the local politics, it's the domestic politics which seems to be driving strategy, geostrategy, rather than the other way around. It's become far more difficult to sell a policy to the local audience, and you have to satisfy them. I'll, if you'd allow me to give an example, I mean, when after Pahalgam happened, and we were looking at very carefully, and I've been here 6 to 7 years, and so and ample friends in India one can talk to, ample friends in Pakistan, and we were calculating what next. And after India's initial reaction of holding Indus Water Treaty in abeyance, cutting off diplomatic ties, well, not really, but cutting down visas, etc., reducing a lot of things which earlier were normal, one was like, what is the next step? And a lot of voices, even from India, were suggesting that perhaps, Mr. Modi may not go more. Reason being, the assessment was that India has numerical asymmetry with Pakistan, but qualitative symmetry, which means it doesn't have an edge to establish deterrence. So perhaps he will not take this route, which he eventually did. And that is primarily driven by the performative factor, which is kind of coming in into our conflicts. The other thing is that I think, like Mr. Modi said in his speech, that the new normal is this. I would argue that actually, starting from 2016, a new normal, India has been struggling to establish a new normal. 2016, India said we crossed over, they did. Damaged, an element of a camp of Lashkar-e-Taiba. Pakistan said, no nonsense, they haven't done that. India said, we did it, nobody could counter-check. So 2019, greater visibility, 2 days of war, greater visibility. Indian aircraft crossed over, were shot down, and United States jumped in. It was Trump's first term, and matters were diffused. To 2025, the war is extended. It's 4 days instead of 2. Greater violence, greater chest thumping, self-congratulation. Greater muck created by media, a psychological warfare going on as well, which supposedly is supposed to, cater to the other side, but actually was doing both benefit and damage on our own sides. But violence, the element of violence has increased. And the longevity of the wars has also increased. So that's the other takeaway for me. The other is, third factor that's important, is that out of this conflict, what has emerged is that deterrence has not been established. What is deterrence? You have to understand and define deterrence. Deterrence is when you deter the other side from and make them strategically change their policy, which had happened in, for example, after Kargil. I mean, after Kargil, General Musharraf Pakistan's president and army chief, had reviewed his policy, had agreed and announced to shut down Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba. This time, didn't happen. So India did not, despite the use of force, manage to achieve that deterrence. In fact, what has also happened is that after a long time, Kashmir has become internationalized. I mean, when Donald Trump, who's supposedly more of a partner with India, Quad, etc., says, invite them for a marco, invite them for a dinner, make them sit down, talk about everything. I'm going to intervene. I'm going to make them sit down and talk. It means that internationalizing. Even when Narendra Modi says, we're only going to talk about POK, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, then it still means internationalizing of the Kashmir issue, because you've got to sit down and talk with the other side about Kashmir. Whether be it Pakistani Kashmir, but once you start talking about Pakistani Kashmir, then you are bound to kind of sit down and talk about the larger Kashmir issue. I mean, the context can't be lost. The other thing where, right before I came for the seminar, there was, I was in this discussion with a Pakistani journalist, and they were like, we won, we did better, and you try to explain that, look, it's actually a draw. The conflict is a draw. Both sides can claim, yes, I won. The other side can say, I won. But I think geopolitically, where there have been benefits for Pakistan, is that internationalization, Kashmir is back into the discussion globally, is not that you're going to open every single paper and see people saying, but people can understand where the problem is. The world can understand internationalization of Kashmir. And the other is hyphenation of India and Pakistan. So, while there is the China factor, and I think very quickly, let me also say that in this conflict, despite that 80 to 82% of Pakistani equipment today is Chinese, and therefore, there is a natural engagement. But the fact of the matter is that this has been happening for a long time. And this is also because in the international community, the global powers have not been too willing to sell to Pakistan. Fair enough. China's the only one which sells. But despite that, I think what is important to note is that China has been a supplier, but China has not. And China is Pakistan's friend, no doubt about it. But it's important that China has actually held off. China has not intervened very intensely in this conflict. It has allowed the two sides to play in the same fashion that during India-China conflict, recent India-China conflict in Galwan, there were many voices in Pakistan who said, we should have actually held hands together and fought. China didn't encourage that, because for China, I am sufficient in giving a two-front situation to India. I don't need you. I'm not going to involve you. And historically, just very briefly, historically during Kargil, when Pakistan went to United States, and this is a history we should not forget, when Pakistan went to United States, but before that, the entire delegation had gone to China. And I remember a conversation with who was then the air chief. And I remember him telling me a very interesting story. He said, we went there and I said, I want this aircraft, this missile, this, that, and the other. And he said that PLA Air Force chief said to me, sure, you can take anything, provided our leaders agree and decide. Which was a signal that no, you cannot take everything and leave. It's a political decision. And China then had advised Pakistan to withdraw. I'll stop here.
Okay, I'm going to ask a few questions of Shruti, but Shruti, you wanted
Yeah,
to.
I actually just wanted to respond because a couple of things here. I think that the issue is not that China is not engaged. Of course, it's engaged because its fighter jets came through, or the fact that it is part of the hardware, that its hardware was tested. I think my point was slightly different, which is to say, it's not clear. People are speculating why Trump intervened when he did. And the question, of course, is the fact that the nuclear question has not worked as a deterrent. And the idea that nuclear bases perhaps were touched in the Pakistani context. And that is what spooks, and that's really the question, that whether America is securitizing the Pakistani nuclear base. So I think I just wanted to put that straight on the table, which is that I think this has been a limiting exercise for China, and I don't think the Chinese have held off. I think the fact that the UN statement was the way it was, highly watered down, in which the perpetrators were not mentioned, shows that that the Chinese are able to wield a significant amount of diplomatic sort of weight in multilateral bodies which now don't belong to the 21st century but belong to the Cold War architecture. So I just wanted to say that my issue really with, I have a great amount of respect for Dr. Siddiqa, but the formulation and description belongs to the Cold War era, whereas what has happened is very much about a fragmented world in which it is not clear where the power centers are.
Okay, Shruti, now moving on. In light of the subcontinent's partition legacy, including the formation of Bangladesh, do you see this latest conflict as part of a continuous pattern of unresolved historical trauma?
Yes and no. I think, as I've argued, and there are a couple of really brilliant students here from Cambridge who are doing that very good work. I do think that there are, phases to this history. I do think that there is a categorical shift in the history of the subcontinent with the formation of Bangladesh, which is in effect a rejection of the original partition of 1947, which meant that religion is not sufficient basis of nationality. However you want to cut that corner, whether it's federalism, whether it's militarism, whether it's Bengali nationalism, whether it is armed conflict, those debates we can have. But there is a step change in 71, 72, both with Pakistan's foreign policy towards India, but also the fact that it is no, and I think the Kashmir story cannot just be seen in isolation. It is part of the story of what happens with Bangladesh. So that's where I would put it, that one needs to, it's 80 years down the road. I think it is safe to say certainly India is very post-imperial. Its bigger relations are now with countries like America, with even the Gulf, the new relationships in the greater sort of Muslim world. So I don't see the fact that it has taken, several years to get the free trade agreement that has just happened here, tells you that the ties with the imperial story have kind of really weakened, certainly for the Indian case, which is not to say that the relationship is not special or deep. So I think this belongs to 72 would be one line. The second line of date line would be the global war on terror, which would be 2001 onwards. And the question now, as I keep saying, is, are we in a new date line, which is a new date line, which is about a different kind of America, which is very introverted, which is turning away from its Cold War legacy, as well as a China which is feeling the heat of its ex-Western alliances What is its sphere of influence? I'd like to know what the exact sphere of influence of China is, barring Pakistan and North Korea. If those are your best friends, that's not a world power. So India is having to kind of navigate a very difficult terrain because it has a huge amount of potential as a market, as a place in, as it were, the new global economy. But it is not winning the global argument on third-party terror. And that is really where it's at.
The other question is, do you believe that the previous kind of peace-building efforts like the Lahore Declaration or the Agra Summit failed because of leadership missteps or structural issues?
I think there are structural issues. So, okay, I've written a book on violence, which doesn't mean I promote it. Quite the opposite. I feel that one has to take this question very seriously. It's not very easy. So when the initial conflict happened, I don't know, many of you're all journalists, you would see that there were lots of newspaper articles where the question of boundaries was being discussed again. Can there be, a different kind of settlement for India, for Pakistan? Maybe the boundaries need to change. I'm not of that view at all. I do think that whether it has been in Iraq, whether it has been globally, it is very hard to change the map. Regardless of any conflict. And yes, the settlement happened. There are two views. There are people on both sides of India and Pakistan who feel, oh yes, this was a mistake and we could all be together. I'm much more on the realist side, which is that it happened 75 years ago. One needs a way to deal with people who are antagonistic with you. This is an antagonistic history. There is no shying away from it. That this is not a relationship of mutual parting. This was a fratricide. A lot of people killed each other, and that the starting point ought to be, we don't like each other, right? And then you can make some peace. You cannot have peace when you're faking friendship and then sending violent attacks one way or another against each other. So I do think it's very difficult to say this. This is not about people-to-people thing, but this is at the level of what the geopolitical relationship is between the two countries. And I think the question of hyphenation it's a kind of phantasmic hyphenation, because ultimately Pakistan as an economy is not in a position to be hyphenated. So the question is going to be how the world is going to securitize itself anew for a global economy which is highly connected at a time when everyone has become very nationalist, very introverted, in which Pakistan has managed to kind of assert itself in this position. But I'm not being sanguine. I don't think it has deep legs. Precisely because the economic factor today is very, very overwhelming for most geostrategic considerations.
Ayesha? Yeah, sure.
See, just want to give an explanation here. I think it's, couple of points, and the thing is that I'm also one of those who is not a great fan of the two-nation theory. Having said that, let me also say that very recent developments in political developments in the region, not just India and Pakistan, but all around. An India which is far too assertive in search of a greater role for itself can tend to make which underestimates the politics of its neighbors, can have its own problems. And today, for example, Bangladesh, other than Awami League, this is a problem which, I mean, today it's the Bangladeshis which are talking about that, yes, two-nation theory is relevant. Countries change, societies change. They don't remain static. And my understanding is, with my interaction with Indians, a lot of lovely friends there, and a lot of great visits there as well, is that India doesn't bother to really understand and read its neighbors to its own benefit. I mean, forget about Pakistan, or forget about Bangladesh, or forget about Maldives or anyone else. You have to understand, in order to be a bigger power, you have to understand at least. I mean, we are not even coming down to magnanimity. I'm saying understand what your neighbors are, what is the evolution happening there. So Bangladesh has had issues with India. So it's not that two-nation. I mean, while I, as a Pakistani, would want this to kind of not think about two-nation theory, somebody else in the region, which parted, in 71, we talk about it in Pakistan that, in 71, majority of Pakistan walked out on the idea of two-nation theory. And that part of, what was once East Pakistan is talking about it more than us. The other thing, very, very quickly, the other thing is that there has been changes also in Pakistan. And that changes are, for instance, that Punjab, which is, Indian Punjab is just one of the states. For Pakistan, Punjab is geographically bigger, but also politically bigger. And there has been a change in the last 10 years. In fact, the other day we were discussing, and this is after Pahalgam. So somebody asked me that, is Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, the hawkish, the jingoistic statements he made, is he going to be more popular? So, we were discussing, and this friend said, Pakistani, Ken, and they said that, look, he's underestimating. Because in Punjab, anti-Indianism is not the hot cake today as it used to be. I think where a mistake which India made, and especially since Mr. Modi arrived, is not.
Sorry, please don't.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Not invest and not understand and not invest in civil societies around the region, and to actually think that one day these civil societies can actually be more of a strength to him and for India than anybody else.
Okay, the main question I wanted to ask you is, what is the role of Pakistan's military in shaping foreign policy towards India, especially during such high-stakes scenarios like what just happened?
One sentence, everything. I can't hide away from it. I mean, they make the foreign policy. And in fact, the problem has been that while Pakistani politicians have been investing in rethinking India and reaching out, the military as an institution is not invested in it. And I think that's where my argument comes in, that the interim periods between conflict, India has to be more thoughtful and a deeper strategy about attracting and reaching out. And this is not about publicity. This is not about fake media. This is not about creating stories. It's actually, and there are many ways of reaching out. India's democracy, many other things used to be, the hot selling story in Pakistan or, other parts of the region. Not so much now. And I think there is a need to understand and reach out. We as civil society are partners. We can be invested. There was much more criticism that used to come from Pakistan about Pakistani military and its approach towards India. And if the voices are dying down, it's not just because the military has been successful. It's also because something else is happening.
To what extent does the Pakistan military kind of calibrate its response to India with an eye on global perception, particularly the West and, of course, among allies like China?
I would say that China is a more reliable, of course, is a reliable partner for Pakistan. But what Pakistan, and especially the military, has been looking at much more intently in the last 6-7 years is the United States. And their perception was, I know I'm not going to be a frontline state, but I would want to maintain my dialogue with the United States so that, it's basically, I don't want to sit on the table, but please let me stand in the room. And there's much more that can be achieved by continuing to stand in the room. And this is exactly what has happened. They have a communication, they have, they don't care. And I think it's important for Indians to understand one thing, that because India doesn't understand Pakistan broadly, it doesn't understand that, yes, its economic issues are there, they're permanent, right? We go beg the IMF, we go beg the Saudis, we go beg the UAE, but there is an understanding, and the military definitely has this understanding, that the world is not about to allow us to starve. So as long as I can sustain myself, and a major part of Pakistan's budget, it's not just the IMF or the World Bank or the Saudis or the Chinese. It actually are remittances from Pakistanis around the world. So there is money, constant flow of money, and the world is also thoughtful, and they do provide services here and there. So I can sustain myself, and as long as I can sustain myself, I can sustain my ambitions as well. And for that sustaining of Pakistan, a critical relationship is China is it's a reliable ally, but what they definitely want is United States. And they have been, the whole theory which came out in 2021, which was that the government of Pakistan announced a strategy, a grand strategy, which was, we're shifting from geostrategy to geoeconomics. Now, basically, it's reaching out to the United States and saying, you don't want me jumping into China's lap? I don't want to jump into China's lap either. So you have to be in a conversation with me. And I think that's where they've been more successful.
Can I say something? I don't think one can, I think I'm a realist in that sense, in the sense that we all know the debate between people who think that, good values and ideas should govern the world, and then how the world really is. And I think the problem is that realism has won out, mainly because none of those things have worked out for India. the ability to have dialogue in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, post-Kargil, you know, everyone knows what happens when Musharraf comes to India. You know, I think the demand for that understanding now has very few takers. And I don't mean you don't have to be part of the A government or B party or C party. I think there is the issue is that how can you have dialogue with when those dialogues historically have not been sustained, quite apart from the fact that you know, there is a kind of unpredictability. You call it performative, but there's a kind of periodic, you know, predictability with which attacks happen, which are not restricted to Kashmir. So, you know, we cannot take that out of the picture without over asserting it, right? But so I think so it's not simply the Cold War has gone. Global international languages are under threat. Liberal internationalism was the governing principle through which the global war on terror was prosecuted. Now, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, we can all have an opinion on it. But as a result, the West has run out of fig leaves. The question that this is hypocritical is one side of it. But there has been a denuding of liberal internationalism and of that kind of peacemaking language which was available. At the same time, national interest, which has always driven foreign policy, has become center stage in all democracies, whether it is America, whether it is India, whether it is, you know, what have you. So I do think that, you know, whether India understands Pakistan or not, I don't know. I can only speak about it historically. I can see what is unfolding. And I do think at a very human level, never mind at the level of states, when those dialogues have failed, then I don't think military deterrence is the idea, but I think the demand for a dialogue, I don't think that's where it's at. I don't think whether it happens now through third-party intervention of the Americans or not, I mean, you know, I do think this is big power play in the world. These small wars, whether they're happening in India or elsewhere, to say nothing of Ukraine, to say nothing of Gaza, the thing is that these small wars, these small hot conflicts, are really about the remaking of the global order. And it is my view, and I don't think Ayesha Siddiqa will like it, or I don't even know who will like it. It is my view that this is a last gasp of the old militaristic establishment in Pakistan. Because this, you know, because there is nothing, you know, what can be achieved after this, I'm not sure. If you have more and more of this violence, it is incredibly dangerous, given that both nations are nuclear. Secondly, we have talked about Pakistan, we have talked about Bangladesh. The question was that the dog whistling that happened, which presaged this latest episode, brings to center stage that India has a huge Muslim minority population, and its Muslim neighborhood is entirely irresponsible of its co-religionists. There is no getting away from that, quite apart from what Indian democracy might be throwing periodically. And I think that cynicism has goes back, since you mentioned partition, goes back all the way to the 20th century history, where actually the political establishment of the two nations on India's kind of borders, i.e. Bangladesh more recently, and Pakistan historically, have, you know, been more guilty, or equally guilty, if not more guilty, in making the Indian Muslim minority population hostage to their nationalist agendas.
See, firstly, bad news. Pakistani militarism is in fact going to strengthen. In fact, I remember jokingly, you know, when before the war started, chatting with an Indian friend, and I said, we were trying to assess what Mr. Modi will do now. And I said, listen, if you don't have a decisive force, please don't, I'm begging you, don't attack us, because nothing is going to happen to the military, but they're going to ride us for a decade or more, if not more. And what this war has done is that allowed the military in Pakistan to rebuild the pushback, its image, and the pushback it had. And I think that's where the Indian government also completely miscalculated. The army chief, very unpopular, blah, blah, blah. So he'll be an easy pushover. No. I think important is that, and it's like, probably me and Shruti are talking in two different spaces. But the fact of the matter is that, in terms of deterrence gets established only if you have a decisive edge over the adversary. And that decisive edge was never there right before the conflict started. We were very conscious of it. The world was also very conscious of it. It was not numbers. As I've been kind of taking trouble explaining to, for example, even my Pakistani friends, when they say, one fashionable thing that has come out, the J-10Cs did better than Rafales. And I tell you, and I keep telling them, I said, no. Even the Pakistan Air Force didn't say Rafales are bad aircraft. They said it's the man behind the machine. And the fact of the matter is that we have a different kind of a relationship with our original equipment manufacturer, which is China. We exercise with them, we spend more time with them than you guys had with the French. You buy 36 aircraft, and remember there was a whole story about how Rafales were, the Air Force, Indian Air Force wanted more, then, finally they got 36. And we haven't had, even time to practice with them. And the assessment of Indian Air Force and Indian air capabilities had been coming in, papers had been published internationally, I'm talking about United States and others, assessing that, where the regional strength is. So, but going back, this war has definitely politically damaged us in Pakistan. It has strengthened the military. And, I would make Shruti president of Pakistan or whatever, if somehow she could get rid of militarism. No, we're not that, as Shruti, we're not as bad as you imagine. And the thing is that I think it's important to, understand that it may be, the last gasp of Cold War politics and, rebuilding of global geopolitics and a new world order coming, around. But the fact of the matter is that if you take a distant look from the perspective of the international players, I think the problem is that, and Mr. Trump is so expressive that it kind of comes out, that for the United States, for the longest, South Asia has been less relevant. And every now and then it kind of resurfaces. This started to engage in a partnership with India, which was in the form of Quad. We're still not clear whether, Western scholars and analysts of military say, no, Quad is not a military alliance, Quad is more of a geopolitical alliance. What strengths are you going to invest in it? So we're still not clear. Even Mr. Trump is not, who's going to be there for 4 years. He's not clear. I mean, his big thing is, I'm a peacemaker, so I don't want wars. So what is he investing in? And yes, that in itself, that confusion itself creates a problem.
Okay, we've got just about 10 minutes before we open it out to some of the audience. Please be quick with your answers. Shruti, what are the historical lessons from Indo-Pak crises should current policymakers be heeding more seriously?
As I said, I think there is a global urgency for a new set of global norms to come. Secondly, I do think the global architecture of governance will have to reflect the changes in geopolitical orders. I do think the UN may exist, but is unable to do very much. Quad has been mentioned. It's absolutely right that one doesn't know whether it is a military or a strategic or an economic horizon. But I do see that these sorts of new kinds of multilateral bodies and competition between them is emerging, whether it's BRICS versus, RCEP versus, Quad. So global architecture is in front of us changing. And the small wars, these are small limited wars, they're probably endless, they're probably pretty violent, do bring a window into that changing order. So in that sense, I do think it's a bit unprecedented. I don't think there are direct lessons to be had, but rather to see that, in my view, that an older order has pretty much come to an end, and a new order has not come into being. It's a kind of world adrift at the moment, and I think it's not about wanting or not wanting to be a president of any country. I do think that the issue, what I meant was that, this kind of conventional militarism that has, Dr. Siddiqa is the expert, I'm not. That sort of source of power will change, given also the fact that India's defense strategy, its manufacturing, all of that is under huge change currently. And I actually think, unlike Dr. Siddiqa, I think I'm actually okay if the Americans don't pay much attention to India. It actually is it's a fine place to be, and
Been paying too much attention of late.
exactly. So I actually feel that, the 50s and 60s, where India was kind of at a distance from America, we can debate about it. Those were, they had their advantages. So I think the seeking of attention, American attention, or the seeking of closer ties, sometimes, it is not always productive. But of course, now India and America have certain sort of strategic alliances in a way that was not the case 20 years ago. And of course, the nuclear deal here is the critical turning point.
Okay, one question to you, Ayesha. Do you see any internal institutional reforms, well, I'm daring to ask that question, or pressures within the Pakistan military that might kind of change how it engages with India in the coming years?
No. But let's make it simple. I think the one institution, and I think it's important to note that what this conflict has done, this recent conflict, is also completely disempowered, led, to greater disempowerment of the political class. But it's not where it started. It has started a bit earlier, because the generation of politicians of the 1980s, which had understood. See, the entire decade of the 90s, Benazir Bhutto, Nawaz Sharif, Benazir Bhutto, Nawaz Sharif. I think what these politicians understood was that in order to empower themselves, in order to change civil-military balance in Pakistan, the one thing they had to invest in was improving ties with India. That is something which was understood. And each one of them in this space tried hard for it. Nawaz Sharif kind of tried, suffered. And it's because of that that they have a relationship where actually Narendra Modi respects, the one politician that he respects in Pakistan is Nawaz Sharif. And Nawaz Sharif is very invested in the idea of peace with India and peace in the region. He sincerely believes in it. And I don't even think that, Imran Khan as a politician, they can have different, raise different tactical voices, and one can explain the dichotomy and the gaps in their policy. But I don't think there is a single politician in Pakistan who doesn't understand it today, that a stronger political base requires strengthening of ties with India. Let there be no doubt about it. I think, and this is a point which I would like to raise. I think, and this is where an investment of thought, if nothing more, needed to come from across the border, which is open up, provide more opportunities. Look, let's go back to Mr. Vajpayee. And Mr. Vajpayee, he came, he was open-hearted, he was broad-visioned, came to Lahore, said, we don't want to kind of conquer Pakistan, we're not against, don't want to pose any existential threat to Pakistan, we recognize Pakistan. That was the best moment.
But then Kargil happened.
And I'm talking about it. Huh? Let me finish. So, and then Kargil happened. Yet, and I would recognize Mr. Vajpayee's thinking that despite that, when General Musharraf, the author of Kargil, the architect of Kargil, began to talk, he came back to Pakistan again. And so, the thing is that kind of investment, a constant investment, and, talks, the thing is that, I'd be lying if I say that Pakistan military doesn't do, the fuck-ups that it does. That it's not kind of risking the lives of, forget about Indians, of Pakistanis. But my argument is then that when we do not have militarily a decisive edge, and when India's economic strength doesn't impress the other side either, you'd end up, the only way out is to have a conversation. Even if you think that your neighbor is mad, you still have to, there is no other option but to have that conversation. And, very recently, a very good journalist friend, he tweeted about it. He said, what India should be doing is encouraging Pakistani businessmen to come and invest in India. Now, of course, he got completely beaten down by the Indian side rather than from Pakistan. But just think about it. If we were allowed to very quickly develop this thought itself, that the problem is that over decades, we've actually not invested in each other and understood that we are not just neighbors, that in order to change our attitude, we need to have greater investment in each other.
Okay.
Very quickly. Actually, I just want to say, because I'm a sort of I do think with psychoanalysis a little bit, and I just want to say, sometimes distance is a very good thing. And, when there is too much intimacy, there can be, of course, love, but intimacy can also produce murderous hatred. And that has been the story of the relationship between the two. And I think a good distance is what is a distance which is manageable, so that the destinies of the two countries can actually be separated. Because after all, that was the logic of the two nations. There is no point after 75 years thinking that it did not happen. It happened. And I would think the delinking of the two the countries and their two histories is the greatest possibility of peace that it offers.
Oh, 1 second. This is going too far.
This is exactly what Mr. Modi thought after the last round. Yeah, he was keeping the distance and the silence. That didn't work either.
Okay.
You can have violence and then, and as Steve Cohen put it, I was reminded of the story that it's the only country which will put a gun to its own head to demand a dialogue. Other people will put a gun to your head, and this is a very famous story about the fact that, you will demand a dialogue by doing so.
Okay, so to end it on very brief answers from both of you, because we need to take questions, do you finally think there is any realistic path towards sustainable peace or even some stable deterrence? I mean, or are we
Deterrence, probably.
locked in a cycle of managed hostility?
That would be great if we can. I mean, that's my very personal view. I don't know about. I think the question about the Modi doctrine or the Jaishankar doctrine has not been so much about what I have been saying, because I've written a whole book on the question of how this kind of intimate fraternal violence has produced the question of India and Pakistan. So I'm not talking about that, but I would, in general, think when there is too much intimacy, too much, in thinking. I mean, the fact that the raison d'être has to be India still. I mean, that needs to be delinked. I mean, if the fact is that Pakistan has a relationship with China, that's now the story. So think about that. One needs to leave each other alone a little bit more. And that would be the only possibility. And the possibility is not going to come through dialogue, I'm afraid, because those have historically failed to deliver anything enduring.
Well, India has to be less haunted about the Pakistan-China relationship because it's a regional power as well. It's going to be there, and
That's what it is.
and the thing is that I think, again, think about it. I'm not saying, when I say conversation, I'm not saying flowers begin to blossom and there is peace all over and there is love everywhere in the air. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm still talking about an engagement which allows us, I mean, you can have silence, you can, but the thing is that India does take silence to, and in this conflict, they've taken silence to an nth degree. I mean, even shutting down voices from Pakistan, like, I got kind of blocked on Twitter in India, which is like, ridiculous is hardly the word which kind of defines it. So, if you're not willing to hear even reasonable or less reasonable voices and see what the other side is saying, not all are going to be good and not all are going to be bad.
We're running out of time, and I would love to thank Shruti Kapila and Dr. Ayesha Siddiqa for their valuable participation, and I think they've enlightened us with their points of view.
No, thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.